All right, let's dive in. Have you ever read a book that just completely flipped a switch in your brain? One that gave you this brand new way of seeing yourself, your relationships, maybe even reality itself? Well, today, that's exactly what we're doing. We're going on a journey through some incredibly powerful ideas from books that do just that. And we're going to use one of the oldest ideas in philosophy as our map. So, our guide for all this is a 2,400-year-old story, Plato's Allegory of the Cave. Just picture it. People chained up in a dark cave since birth. All they can see are shadows dancing on the wall in front of them, cast by a fire behind them. To them, these shadows, they're not just shadows. That is reality. It's the only thing they've ever known. And this is where Plato's story gets, well, a little uncomfortable. It asks a pretty radical question. What if a lot of the things we believe about our own limits, about how love works, about our purpose, what if they're all just shadows on the wall? What if we're the prisoners? The good news is there's a way out. And the books we're talking about today are like the keys to unlock those chains. So the first step out of the cave isn't trying to change the world. Nope. It's about understanding the person who's looking at it. It's about getting to know our own minds, our own internal operating system. Timothy Galway's book, The Inner Game of Tennis, just nails this. He says we all have two selves at war inside our heads. You've got self one, which is that nagging narrator, the inner critic, the voice that's constantly yelling, don't mess this up. But then there's self two, the silent, intuitive part of you that just knows what to do. And here's the secret. Mastering anything isn't about trying harder. It's about getting self one to just be quiet for a minute so self two can finally play the game. Okay, so how do you actually make that kind of change stick? Well, this is where James Clear's Atomic Habits comes in. He argues it's all about identity. Think about it. You don't stick with habits because you have amazing willpower. You stick with them because they become a part of who you are. The real goal isn't to read a book, it's to become a reader. It's not to run a marathon, it's to become a runner. Lasting change only happens when your actions start to reflect who you believe you are. But what about the limits of that identity? What happens when you think you've hit your absolute final wall? What if I told you that when your mind is screaming that you are completely, totally done, you're actually only here at 40%? This is the 40% rule from David Goggins. This is a guy who went from being overweight, working a dead-end job, to a Navy SEAL and an ultra-marathon legend. What he figured out is that our brains have a built-in safety switch. They're designed to make us quit long before our bodies actually need to. So that voice in your head that's screaming at you to stop, it's lying. And just knowing that, well, that gives you access to the other 60% you didn't even know you had. Okay, so once we start rewiring our own minds, we can begin to see the other people in the cave a little more clearly. So let's shift gears and talk about our relationships and explore the kind of hidden rules of how we all connect with each other. This is probably the biggest puzzle in modern romance, and psychotherapist Esther Perel explains it brilliantly in Mating in Captivity. We want our partner to be our best friend, our rock, that's love. It needs safety. But we also want passion, mystery, that's spark, that's desire. And here's the problem. The very things that make love grow, like security and total closeness, can actually smother desire. A truly passionate, lasting relationship isn't about becoming one person. It's about learning how to dance between being close and giving each other space. And you can see this idea play out so beautifully in Alain de Botton's novel, The Course of Love. He follows this couple, Robbie and Kirsten, from that initial exciting romance all the way into the quiet, everyday challenges of marriage and kids and resentment. The book basically shows us that the real love story isn't the meet-cute. It's everything that comes after the credits roll. And that brings us to the core message here. Real, mature love isn't some magical feeling that just happens to you. It's a skill. And it's a choice. It's about navigating boredom and disappointment, and then actively choosing to find your way back to each other. It's about choosing to stay even when the story gets complicated. Now, as we zoom out from ourselves and our relationships, we start bumping into the really big questions. Like, what's the point of all this? Why are we even here? This is the search for meaning. It's about trying to design a life that actually feels like it matters. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, wrote in Man's Search for Meaning that our main drive in life isn't pleasure, but the hunt for purpose.
He saw with his own eyes that the people who survived the concentration camps weren't always the strongest physically. They were the ones who had a why, a reason to keep living. Without that why, we just fall into this existential vacuum, this deep boredom that no amount of success or entertainment can ever really fill.
So, where do we find this meaning? Well, the research from psychologists Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi gives us a huge clue. He found that our happiest moments in life usually don't happen when we're just chilling out. They happen when we're in a state of flow, when we're so completely lost in a challenging activity that everything else just melts away. It's in the struggle, in that deep focus, that we find happiness and meaning. So, how much time do we get to find this flow, this meaning? Well, if you live to be about 80 years old, your entire life, all of it, will fit into roughly this many weeks. 4,000. That's it. This is the bracing, essential truth at the heart of Oliver Burkeman's 4,000 Weeks. He argues that our whole modern idea of productivity is a trap. We are obsessed with getting everything done, but that's literally impossible. Your inbox will never be empty, your to-do list will never end. Real freedom doesn't come from doing more stuff. It comes from having the courage to decide what you're not going to do, so you can go all in on the handful of things that truly matter. Speaking of what matters, for decades, we've all been taught that our needs are stacked like a pyramid, right? You gotta get your safety and security sorted out before you can even think about the higher stuff like self-actualization. But what if that's all wrong? In his book Transcend, Scott Barry Kaufman reveals that Maslow himself never actually drew that pyramid. It was a misinterpretation that just kind of became fact. So Kaufman gives us a much better, more dynamic metaphor: a sailboat. The hull of the boat, that's your security needs. It keeps you stable, it keeps you safe from the stormy seas of life. But the sail represents your growth needs. That's what catches the wind and actually moves you forward toward exploration, love, and purpose. And this is the most profound, game-changing part of the whole idea. You don't need a perfect leak-proof hull to open your sail. You can be struggling with anxiety, you can be feeling insecure, and you can still experience moments of deep purpose and connection. Growth isn't some level you unlock after you've fixed all your problems. It's something you can go after right now, no matter how messy your life feels. So, here we are. We've talked about rewiring our minds, taking a new look at our relationships, and rethinking our entire search for meaning. We've stepped out of the cave and into the bright, blinding sun. So, what now? Look, the journey out of the cave is never really over. These ideas, the 40% rule, the love and desire paradox, the sailboat, they're not a destination. They're a compass. They don't tell you what you're supposed to believe. They just give you new ways to look at your own beliefs, to start questioning the shadows on your own wall. And really, that brings us to the final, most important question. This isn't about what these authors think. It's about you. Seeing the world in a new light is one thing, but actually living in it is something else entirely. The real challenge and the real adventure starts now.